my ambient birds of the jungle sounds because we can't play music for the time being. I'm actually not supposed to listen to music all year. That's if I'm being very stringent, honoring the death of my mom. I'll be saying Kaddish for 11 months. Definitely no parties, no live music concerts. But after the Shloshim, after the first 30 days, certain of these obligations and stringencies are eased. And in my mom's case, because Rosh Hashanah arrives Sunday night, that actually cancels the Shloshim. After that, for example, I'll be able to shave if I am socially reproached. You can actually look up those laws. I'm going to keep it moving today because I'm also in a period where I lead the prayer service in the synagogue whenever I can, along with saying Kaddish. And so I got to bolt out of here, like 6:47 to get there in time. And then starting next week, it's just not going to matter because I won't be able to teach this class and get to the afternoon service, Mincha, anyway. So at that point, I'll have to get to an afternoon service in the afternoon. Usually we do afternoon prayers at the end of the afternoon, so we're right there in synagogue and catch the evening service right away. But in my situation, because of this class, I'll try to get to a synagogue in the early afternoon, teach the class around this time, and then get to an evening service. And there are evening services that are even very late, like 10:30 at night. So that's how I'm planning. But always thinking, how will I make sure to say Kaddish 3 times a day for my mom? Our learning today, again, teaching and hopefully learning in honor, in memory of Babette Bat Yoel, my mom of blessed memory. I feel her presence so strongly here. In case you're just joining us after the hiatus, my mom passed away last week. We had the Shiva. That's why I took a number of days off. Last night, we began the catch-up. We did the highlights of 8 pages. Right? What do we do? Or maybe 7 pages. We did, what did we do? 67 to 73. 7, right. We did 7 pages last night. We're doing highlights of 5 pages tonight, and then we should be caught up. Let's light up the darkness. Of course, catching up is relative because now we'll have Shabbos, so I'll do the class tomorrow, the normal Friday time, noon on Friday, noon Pacific. And then at the end of Shabbat, Saturday night. Sunday, I think I'll probably teach at noon, like it was a Friday, because then Sunday evening, we begin Rosh Hashanah. And we won't be able to have a class on Monday or Tuesday. Then we'll come back on Wednesday. But we'll put an announcement on the Facebook page about that. In case you haven't heard the shofar today, keeping it moving. Okay, yesterday I had a bolt before the end of class, so there was one question left over from yesterday. Lesuik and Eugenia asked, is greeting a man, like saying hello, considered forbidden for a married woman or a single Jewish woman? And that was in reference to yesterday. It would be grounds for divorce. If a Jewish woman, it said if she was saying hello to every man in the marketplace. So that's not just means like somebody who is politely saying good morning, in a store or passing someone on the street. They're talking about somebody whose behavior rises to the level of, let's say, licentious flirtation. It's clear that there's sexual innuendo going on, very immodest behavior, not consistent with the values of Judaism and Jewish marriage. That's what they were talking about there. Just quickly welcoming Guy, Lucy, Tom, Sandy, James, Kelly, Bella, Bill, Belle, Sharon, Shandora, David, Melissa, Tom, Paula, Karen, Robert, people having discussion. Beautiful. I'm just trying to keep it moving so we can cover our 5 pages today. And over there on the YouTube side, welcoming Aoife. Okay, let's get into it. covering the highlights of 5 pages today. We're actually going to complete chapter 7 and open chapter 8 here in Tractate Kesubos, the 15th volume of the Talmud. We are starting in chapter 7, continuing our discussion of Mishna number 4 here in chapter 7. And this Mishna was discussing a betrothal, right? A man and woman were betrothed. In ancient times, the betrothal would often happen a year or more before the marriage happened. And a betrothal in many ways is like a contract. So is marriage like a contract. And if one of the parties misrepresented, the woman was misrepresented by her father or by herself to the prospective husband. For example, they claim she had no blemishes and she had blemishes, right? So then, there's reps and warranties, right? So it's like she was misrepresented to the husband, and that would be grounds for annulling the betrothal, and she would not even need a bill of divorce afterward. However, if they were betrothed and then they got married, well, then they're probably going to need a bill of divorce. And then there's the question is, well, is he going to have to, now that he discovers the blemishes, does he owe the full marriage payment or not? Did he, he said at the time of betrothal, I wasn't aware of these blemishes, but later when she's already living in his house, maybe he basically accepted the blemishes. And if he now divorces her, he should have to pay the full marriage contract. These are the kinds of issues that we are dealing with. So we picked this up on 74a. Like I said, we're doing highlights of 5 pages, so we're skipping around and just reading selected passages. Rab Ula bar Abba said that Rabbi Elizar said, in the case of one who betroths a woman with a loan, by forgiving a debt that she owes him, right? In return for her accepting betrothal with him, he's going to forgive a loan that she owes him, for forgiving a debt that she owes him, which normally does not affect betrothal, because forgiving a loan is not the same as giving something of value, which is part of the betrothal process, I guess. And he subsequently engages in sexual intercourse with her, which would be the disapproved manner according to the sages, but still an effective manner of moving from betrothal to marriage. If they're betrothed and then they sleep together, so now they're married, even if they haven't stood under the chuppah. And so he subsequently engages in sexual intercourse with her, or in the case of one who betroths a woman with an item worth less than the value of a peruta, right? Part of the betrothal process, you give an item of value. How much value is the minimum? At least 1 peruta, which is a very small coin. But he gave something worth even less than that, so it should not be a valid betrothal. And he subsequently engages in sexual intercourse with her. So now they would seem to be married. But what about the fact that the betrothal was not valid, right? In all of these cases, all agree that she requires a bill of divorce from him. So even though the betrothal was invalid, when they were only betrothed, they could have walked away from it because it was an invalid betrothal, as if it had never happened. But now that they conducted themselves like people who are validly betrothed and they slept together, now it certainly looks like they're married, even if you could argue that they're not. So at least from the point of view of uncertainty and under rabbinic law, they're going to require a bill of divorce before she's free to go marry some other man. Skip a paragraph. Rav Kahana said in the name of Ula, in the case of one who betroths a woman conditionally, and the condition was not fulfilled. I betroth you on condition that your father gives me a new car, and then he doesn't give me a new car, so the condition was not fulfilled. It would seem there was no betrothal. So Rav Kahana said in the name of Ula, in the case of one who betroths a woman conditionally, and the condition was not fulfilled, but he subsequently engages in sexual intercourse with her, so she requires a bill of divorce from him, as like in the previous 2 cases. And this is in accordance with Rabbi Elizar. And the Gemara relates, this was an incident that actually occurred. A man betrothed a woman conditionally, and then he engaged in sexual intercourse with her without specification, and the sages did not have the power to allow her to leave her husband without a bill of divorce. In other words, they were not able to annul the betrothal, which should have been annullable because it was subject to a condition and the condition was never met. But since the betrothed man, who is a husband, in the sense that betrothal, a valid betrothal, in order to break it off, you do need a bill of divorce. And once he committed sexual intercourse with her, even though the original betrothal was invalid, now that they're conducting themselves like a man and wife, if they're going to break it up, they need the bill of divorce. Page 74b. The sages taught, if a man betroths a woman on condition that there are no vows incumbent upon her to fulfill, right? So when you vow a vow and it's a valid vow, you might be able to get to a sage and have him annul the vow for you. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But in the case that is not annulled and it is a valid vow, okay, so now you've just obligated yourself according to that vow, as long as it's a legal vow, so to speak. So one condition of a betrothal might be, okay, I will betroth myself to you as long as there's no other vows you've taken that I don't know about. Like maybe she vowed that she would never eat meat. Now, that shouldn't be condition, the type of thing that would say, well, I don't want to marry her, But on the other hand, if I said, I betroth myself to you on condition that you have no vows, well, it doesn't really matter what the nature of the vow is. If it's a binding vow, my condition was that she have no vows, and she had a vow, so she misrepresented herself if she didn't reveal that to me, right? So, if a man betroths a woman on condition that there are no vows incumbent upon her to fulfill, but there are vows incumbent upon her, and she goes to a halakhic authority, a sage, and he dissolves her vow, okay. Then she is betrothed. I said, I will betroth to her if she has no vows. Now, she had a vow, but she went to a sage and had the vow annulled. Okay, so now the betrothal is valid. However, if the man betroths her on condition that she has no blemishes, there are different kinds of blemishes, let's say a physical blemish, but she does have blemishes. And now she goes to a doctor, and the doctor heals her of the blemishes. So she is not betrothed. What is the difference between I will betroth you on condition that you have no outstanding vows, okay, and she had a vow, so then after this betrothal, she went and had the vow annulled by a sage, and they say the betrothal is valid. But if I say I betroth you, you have no blemishes, and at the time that I said that, she had a blemish, then she went to a doctor and had the doctor, cure her of the blemish, there the betrothal is no good. What's the difference? Because when a sage annuls a vow, it's as if the vow never existed. When a doctor cures a blemish, okay, it's disappeared now. But at the time that you said to me, we're going to get betrothed and you have no blemishes, you had a blemish, even though it's the same, she had a vow, but the sage can annul it retroactively like there never was a vow. The doctor can only cure it in the present time, so she had that physical blemish when we were betrothed, and that's why the betrothal is not valid. Skip down a bit to the bottom of 74b. The Gemara poses a question. What is the fundamental dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Elizar? The Gemara answers, as we learned in a Mishna in Tractate Gittin 45b, if a man who divorces his wife due to a vow that she took subsequently regrets his decision and wants to take her back, he may not remarry her. Similarly, if he divorces her due to a bad reputation that she has acquired, he may not remarry her. I don't have to divorce her because she took a vow. I don't have to divorce her because she acquires a bad reputation. But if that is my reason, my rationale for divorcing her, then even if I regret my decision to divorce her, I cannot remarry her. Why? This is because if he were allowed to take her back, if the vow is dissolved by a halakhic authority, or after discovering that the rumors about her were false, he might say that had he known this, he never would have divorced her. Now, such a statement would retroactively cast doubt on the validity of the bill of divorce, and it could potentially cause her children from a second marriage to have the status of mamzers. He is therefore informed that if he divorces her, due to her having a vow, taking a vow after they were married, or due to her acquiring a bad reputation after they were married, he can never remarry her. So he should think twice before divorcing his wife on those grounds. Skipping forward on page 75a, halfway, the Mishna teaches that all blemishes that disqualify priests disqualify women's betrothal as well. We're talking about physical blemishes. A physical blemish on a priest, like a certain, stain on his skin that's large enough, to amount to a blemish of a priest would disqualify him from performing the priestly avodah, the priestly service in the temple when the temple is standing. And the definition of what amounts to a blemish that disqualifies a priest is the same as the definition of a blemish that if the wife did not reveal it and then the husband found it after they were married, that he would have grounds to divorce and not pay the marriage contract, or just to dissolve the betrothal if he finds out about it after they're betrothed and before they're married. And it would be as if they were never betrothed. So the same standards, blemishes for priests, blemishes for brides. So the same ones. And the sage taught in Tosefta, to these, the blemishes that disqualify priests would also disqualify a bride. And to those blemishes, the sages added several additional blemishes that apply only to brides, right? They disqualify the bride. In other words, if she didn't disclose it to her groom, and then they were betrothed or then they were married, this would be grounds either to annul the betrothal or for a divorce without payment. And what were these additional blemishes that apply to a bride? Sweat, a mole, and foul odor from the mouth. Now the Gemara poses a question, and do these blemishes not also disqualify priests? Didn't we learn in a Mishna with regard to blemishes of animals, the old, the sick, and the filthy? And it was taught, meaning sacrificial animals, you can't bring the old, the sick, and the filthy. And it was taught in a different Mishnah, these blemishes stated concerning animals, whether they are permanent or whether they are temporary, also render people, meaning priests, disqualified as well from serving in the temple. And this shows that filth and sweat also disqualify priests. Why would you say that only applies to brides and not priests? And Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, said, this is not difficult. Here where the Brisa states that these blemishes do not disqualify priests, it is referring to removable sweat, which can be washed off. There, the Mishnah that considers it a disqualifying blemish for priests, it is speaking of sweat that is not removable. Right? So when they're talking about that this would be grounds for divorce, sweat, a mole, foul odor from the mouth, doesn't mean that your wife is sweaty one day, you can give her a divorce. Her breath is not good one day, okay, let's get a divorce. What they're talking about is certain symptoms of chronic conditions where the breath would always be so foul that it would be almost impossible to make love and produce children, or where the sweat is also very foul odor. This is not normal conditions, very rare, that are attached to certain kinds of diseases, where it would just make it repugnant for the couple to have physical relations, and so that would be grounds to break off the marriage. Okay, we're near the bottom of page 75a, and we're going on to a new Mishnah. But I'll just mention, we really don't have much time, but near the end of the discussion of Mishnah number 4, where they're talking about blemishes that could disqualify a woman and break off the marriage, they actually mention breast size and distance between breasts, how big a distance renders it a blemish. They don't say anything about small breasts, but if breasts are too big, then that might be a blemish. But not surprisingly, the sages dispute these standards. If you're curious about that, you can see it in the end of the discussion of Mishnah number 4. We go on to Mishnah number 5. If she has blemishes and she is still in her father's house, right, still living in her father's house, hasn't moved in with a husband, so she could be pre-betrothal or betrothed, but not yet married, so she's still living in her father's house. So if she has blemishes and she is still in her father's house, as she has not yet gotten married, so the father must bring proof that these blemishes appeared on her after she became betrothed, and therefore his field was flooded. Meaning, if she develops a blemish after she becomes betrothed and not before. If it was before, so it's like they didn't disclose to the groom that she had these blemishes, and he would say, I want to break off the betrothal. But if she developed the blemishes after they became betrothed, well, then it's tough luck on the groom. It didn't happen when she was in the domain of the father, even though she's still living there. If it happened after the betrothal, hey, people get blemishes all the time sometime in their life. She and her father didn't do anything wrong because the blemish didn't exist at the time that she was betrothed. But if she has already gotten married and entered the husband's domain when her blemishes are discovered, so then the husband, So if she develops the blemishes while she's living in her father's house, okay, if it happened after the betrothal, then it's tough luck on the groom. But since she is still living in her father's house, the burden of proof is going to be on the father to prove that the blemishes developed after the betrothal. If she's already living in her husband's house, meaning that they're fully married, and then he finds blemishes, and he suspects that the blemishes existed before they were married, but it was never revealed to him, but now that she's already living in his domain, he's got the burden of proof to show that she had these blemishes even before they were married or before they were betrothed, right? So whichever domain she's living in, the burden of proof is going to be on him, either the father or the husband. Consequently, right? So, but if she has already gotten married and entered the husband's domain when her blemishes are discovered, so then the husband must bring proof that she had these blemishes before she was betrothed, and consequently the transaction of betrothal was a mistaken transaction because they weren't revealed to him. And this is the statement of Rabbi Meir. But the rabbis, the majority who disagree with Rabbi Meir, say, in what case is this statement that a husband can claim to have found blemishes in his wife, on account of which he wants to void the betrothal? In what conditions was this said? With regard to hidden blemishes. But with regard to visible blemishes, he can never claim that the betrothal was in error, because he presumably he would have seen the blemishes, and he still accepted to marry her, so forget it. He can never undo the betrothal transaction. If the blemishes are of a hidden nature, okay, then he would have an argument. But if there is a bathhouse in the city where all the women go to bathe, then even with regard to hidden blemishes, he cannot make this claim because he examines her through the agency of his female relatives. Presumably at the bathhouse where women walk around naked, his female relatives would have had a chance to see the prospective bride naked, and they would have seen this blemish and reported it to him. And since that didn't happen, he can no longer claim that it was a mistaken transaction at the time of betrothal. He should have known better. Buyer beware, as it were. Page 76a. A few paragraphs down, Rav Acha, the son of Rav Avia, raised an objection to Rav Ashi's opinion, that's under discussion here, from a Baraisa. Rabbi Meir concedes, with regard to blemishes that naturally come with her from her father's house, and which did not develop after the marriage, okay, so the father must bring proof that she did not have them before the betrothal, even if she was already married when they were discovered. But, right, if it's a kind of thing that it's obviously she had it her whole life, then even though the husband didn't see it, obviously she had this blemish her whole life, like a birthmark. It didn't develop later in life, or like say a missing toe, right? Or I'm sorry, an additional toe. That's why not a missing toe. And they're going to say that. If she has 6 toes, right, and he didn't know that, no one told him, well, she must have been born that way. So it's going to be burden of proof on the father, her father, to show, well, somehow she grew that toe after they were betrothed, or the husband is going to have a right to undo the betrothal or divorce the wife without paying the marriage contract because that blemish was not revealed to him. That's obviously a different opinion than the one before, that it should have been seen in the bathhouse, right? These are competing opinions, disputing opinions. Right, so Rav Acha, the son of Rav Avia, raised an objection that Rabbi Meir concedes with regard to blemishes that naturally come with her from her father's house and which did not develop after she was married, that the father must bring proof that she did not have them before the betrothal, even if she was already married when they were discovered. But why does Rabbi Meir agree in that case? It is similar to the case where someone says, I have 100 dinars in your possession, along with the presumptive status of her body. Therefore, the burden of proof should be on the husband, right? Because the husband, let's say he gave money to her father in order to get the father to agree to betroth his daughter to the husband. Now the husband is trying to undo the betrothal. So in addition to the questions of where should the burden of proof be in terms of whether they revealed she had blemishes or not, in just the regular general terms of contract law, when I am trying to extract money from another person, they have the money, I'm trying to get my hands on it, usually the burden of proof is on me, not on the one who's holding the money. Possession is 99/100ths of the law, in other words. Now the Gemara answers, with what are we dealing here? With a case of a woman who has an additional toe. She was obviously born with that blemish. Now the Gemara is puzzled by this response. If the Baraisa is speaking about an additional toe, what proof could the father possibly bring to argue that the toe grew after the marriage? There's no room for error in that case. And the Gemara answers, actually, he can provide proof that the husband saw her extra toe before the betrothal, and he became appeased about it, and he can't later claim that this is grounds for reversing the betrothal. He was aware of it, and we knew he was aware of it. That kind of proof the father could bring. We skip forward, page 76b, we skip. We're doing highlights of 5 pages. Now we're on 77a, completing the discussion of Mishnah number 5. The Mishna, or the very bottom of 76b, the Mishnah teaches, and the rabbis say, in what case is this statement said with regard to hidden blemishes? But he cannot claim to have been unaware of visible blemishes. Now, Rav Nachman said, an epileptic is considered like a hidden blemish, for it is possible that nobody is aware of her ailment. And here's very interesting how the sages limited this idea that epilepsy is like a hidden blemish. And this applies only if the sickness comes at regular intervals, as the woman and her family can conceal her illness, because when they know she's going to have epileptic fits, they make sure she's hidden, and at home they could hide the illness. But if her attacks do not appear at regular intervals and they can occur at any time, well, then this is considered like a visible blemish. The husband and his family should have done more research on the girl. They didn't know that she was an epileptic. It's treated like a visible blemish. Tough luck, you can't undo the marriage on grounds of that condition. Mishnah number 6. In the case of a man who developed blemishes after marriage, the court does not force him to divorce his wife. Now, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, in what case is this statement said? It is said with regard to minor blemishes. However, with regard to major blemishes, which will be defined later in the Gemara, the court does force him to divorce her. So this is the flip side. If the husband has blemishes that make him, repulsive to his wife, so they're not going to be able to have physical relations, and this is grounds for a divorce. In patriarchal system, right? It's the husband who has the right to divorce, and the wife doesn't. But if he develops these kinds of major blemishes and he doesn't want to divorce her, the court steps in and forces her to grant her the divorce. The Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda teaches the Mishnah in accordance with the version quoted above. The man developed blemishes after marrying his wife. Conversely, Chiya bar Rav teaches the man had blemishes prior to the marriage. So the Gemara clarifies the difference between the two opinions. The one who says that the man who developed blemishes after marriage does not have to divorce his wife says that the same law applies all the more so to one who had blemishes beforehand, as she was aware of them and she accepted them. However, according to the one who says that the Mishnah is referring to one who had blemishes prior to his marriage, and would he say that only in the case that However, the one who says that the Mishnah is referring to one who had blemishes prior to the marriage, he would say that only in that case is the man not compelled to divorce her. But if the blemishes developed after they were married, this is not the law, as she did not marry him under such conditions, meaning he has to grant her the divorce if he developed the blemishes after they got married. So we learn in the Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, in what case is this statement said? This is said with regard to minor blemishes. With regard to major blemishes, the court forces him to divorce her. The Gemara poses a question. Granted, according to the one who says that the correct version is his body developed blemishes, this is the case that there is a difference between major and minor blemishes, as only the major blemishes are grounds for divorce. But according to the one who says that the correct version of the Mishnah is he had blemishes, meaning he hid from her that his body had blemishes before they got married, and then she discovered these blemishes. So can she get the divorce if she wants it? Either way, she was aware of those. If she's aware of the blemishes, she's not going to be able to argue later that she doesn't want to remain married to him. If she was unaware, then she would have a valid argument, right? He misled her. Now the Gemara answers, in the case of major blemishes, she can claim, even if she knew about them before the marriage, that she thought she could live with it. But now that she's actually living with it, she can't. She tried to make it work, but something about this man is just too repulsive. She can't have marital relations with him, and they got to grant her the divorce, is the argument. Okay, we'll stop on that parish there. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 6. Here's Mishnah number 7 of chapter 7. And these are the defects for which the court forces him to divorce her. A man afflicted with boils, or one who has a polyp. It's a special kind of polyp. Or one who works as a gatherer. That refers to a man who gathers dog excrement for a living, and he smells like that. Or one who works as a melter of copper, which also in those days created a foul odor about him all the time. Or one who works as a tanner of hides, another very smelly, chronically smelly profession. Whether he had these defects before they got married, or whether he developed these defects after they became married, the court forces them to divorce if that's what she wants. And with regard to all of these, Rabbi Meir said, even though he stipulated with her ahead of time that he suffers from this particular ailment, or this is his line of work, she can nevertheless demand a divorce and say, I thought I could accept it, but now I realize I cannot accept it. And the rabbis say, if she initially agreed, she must accept it against her will, apart from a situation in which her husband is afflicted with boils. In that case, the rabbis concede to Rabbi Meir that the man must divorce her because this disease consumes his flesh when they engage in marital relations. And the Mishnah relates an additional account. There was an incident in Sidon involving a certain tanner who died childless, and he had a brother who was also a tanner. The brother was required to enter into levirate marriage with the widow. The sages said, okay, she can get out of this yibum. She can say, I could accept living with a tanner for your brother, but I don't have to accept it with you. And so, of course, she performed chalitza to get out of that levirate marriage. We skip forward, page 77b. When they're talking about other defects that would force the divorce, right? They were talking about boils, right? Like terrible skin lesions. It's going to be too much. They're not going to be able to remain married if she doesn't want to remain married to him. Because if they have physical relations, not only will it be repulsive, but it will even like further damage him. It could kill him. He'll be in pain. It's just not going to work. Pertaining to that discussion, they bring in this condition that's even worse than those kinds of serious boils, and that's a condition called Raatan. And what are the symptoms of Raatan? His eyes water, his nose runs, drool comes out of his mouth, and flies rest upon him. So the Gemara further inquires, and what is his cure if he has this condition? What is his cure to remove the insect found in his head, which is associated with this illness, right? They thought that this condition, Raatan, was caused by an insect that flew somehow into his head and is lodged on his brain. So Abaye said, one takes pila and ladanum, which are types of grasses, and the ground shell of a nut, and shavings of smooth hides and artemisia, and the calyx of a red date palm, and one cooks them together and brings the patient into a marble house, meaning one that's completely sealed. And if there is no marble house available, the one performing the treatment brings the patient into a house whose walls have the thickness of 7 bricks and 1 small brick. And the one performing the treatment pours 300 cups of this mixture on the patient's head until his skull is soft. And then he tears open the patient's skull to expose his brain. And he brings 4 myrtle leaves, and he lifts up each time 1 foot of the insect that is found on the patient's brain, and places 1 leaf under each foot of the insect to prevent it from attempting to cling to the brain. And then it is forcibly removed, and he takes it with tweezers, and he then burns the insect so that it will not return to the patient's brain. Okay? Sounds I wonder if they ever actually performed this, or it was more like, are you sure you have this condition? Because here's the treatment. Rabbi Yochanan would announce, be careful of the flies found on those afflicted with Raatan, as they are carriers of the disease. So Rabbi Zera would not sit in a spot where the wind blew, where these flies could go from one who had this disease, Raatan, to a person. Rabbi Elizar would not enter the tent of one who had Raatan. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi would not eat eggs from an alley in which someone lived who had Raatan. But this terrible, terrible disease with a nearly impossible treatment, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi would attach himself to people who had this terrible disease, and he would study Torah with them, saying, the Torah is a loving hind and a graceful doe. If it bestows grace on those who learn it, does it not protect them from illness? In other words, While everyone else would run away from people with this terrible disfiguring disease, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi was so saintly that he would sit with those people and learn with them. When Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi was on verge of dying, they said to the angel of death, "Go and perform his bidding." In other words, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi had come to the end of his life, and it was time for him to be taken. So when God and heaven sent the angel of death to take Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, the angel of death was instructed, do whatever he says, right? So it's amazing, right? That angel of death normally obviously has absolute power over the humans he's sent to gather. He's just going to take us. Nobody wants to go. But in the case of this saint, right, the angel of death was told, do whatever he says. All right, so the angel of death goes. And what does this mean? It means that he's a righteous man and he deserves to die in whatever manner he sees fit. If he wants to die at the end of a long illness, he can do that. If he wants to not die, but just ascend into paradise without dying, he's going to be permitted to do that. That's what it means that the angel of death has been instructed to perform the bidding of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. So what happened? The angel of death went and appeared to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. And Rabbi Yehoshua said to him, "Show me my place in paradise." The angel of death said, "Very well, I will show you your place." Meaning, I won't kill you and take you there. I will just show you your place in paradise. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said to him, "Okay, while we're traveling together, give me your knife, the one you use to kill mortals, lest you frighten me on the way. Now that you've told me that I have the power to decide how I will die, I want to make sure that you don't, overstep your agency and kill me anyway or frighten me into dying. So, let me have your knife, the knife that you use to take people to the next world." And the angel of death handed his knife that he used to take souls to the next world, handed it to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. When they arrived there in paradise, right, not as a resident, but as a guest, he lifted Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi up so that he could look over the wall into paradise and see what his place would be. What did Rabbi Yehoshua do? He jumped over the wall and fell into that other side, thereby escaping into paradise. In other words, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi never died. He ascended without going through the terror and pain of dying. He just, sort of tricked the angel of death into showing him his place, and then he went and claimed it. The angel of death was angry, and he grabbed Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi by the corner of his cloak. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said to him, "I swear that I will not come with you. I will not go back down and die the death of mortals. I'm already here in paradise." The Holy One, blessed be he, said, if he ever in his life requested dissolution concerning an oath that he had taken, so he must return to the world with the angel of death, as he can have his oath dissolved this time also, right? Since he already took an oath, we can dissolve this oath. We're not going to allow, but if he already once in his life took an oath and had it dissolved, then we can dissolve this oath also. What happened? Since Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi had in fact never made a vow while he was alive and subsequently requested that it be dissolved, he was allowed to stay in paradise. The angel of death said to him, "Well, at least give me my knife back so I could do my job gathering souls and bringing them to paradise with normal deaths." However, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi did not give him the knife, as he did not want any more people to die. A divine voice emerged and said to him, "Give the knife back to the angel of death. It is necessary to kill the created beings. Death is the way of the world." And Eliyahu, the prophet Elijah, announced before him, "Make way for the son of Levi, make way for the son of Levi." Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi went and found in paradise Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai sitting on 13 golden stools. And Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said to him, "Are you the son of Levi?" Meaning, I've heard great things about you. You didn't even die. You ascended here. And he said, "Is that you?" And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, "Yes, that's me." So Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said to him, "Was a rainbow ever seen in your days?" And he said, "Yes." So Rabbi Shimon retorted, "Well, if so, then you are not the son of Levi," meaning you can't be such a righteous man that you are allowed to ascend up here without ever dying if a rainbow was ever seen in your lifetime. What does that mean? It means that there's some people that are so saintly that they sustain the whole world, and during their lifetime, the world is never threatened with destruction. Why? What is it about a rainbow? The rainbow is the signal after the story of Noah and the flood that God set the rainbow in the sky as a reminder to him, to God, that no matter how angry I get with these humans who constantly disappoint me and kill each other and perform barbarities and cruelties, that I should just get rid of all of them and start over. The rainbow is the reminder that I won't do that, right? So if there was somebody who was so righteous, like as saintly as this one is being described, then during his lifetime, the rainbow never would have been necessary, because no matter how evil the people were, the incredible merit of that one righteous soul would sustain the whole world, and God would never even think of destroying them. You get the converse of that. When we see rainbows in the sky, it's pretty, but it means that God is so angry with the world that he needs the rainbow to remind him not to destroy the people. So Shimon Bar Yochai says, well, if you saw rainbows in your lifetime, you must not be this Yehoshua ben Levi that I've heard about, because he's the saintliest guy. There wouldn't have been rainbows in his life. And the Gemara comments, and that is not so. For there were no rainbows seen at all during the lifetime of Rabbi Yehoshua. But he thought, I do not want to take credit for myself by presenting myself as such a righteous person. It was just his humility that led him to answer, sure, there must have been rainbows. We finished chapter 7. We open chapter 8. I'm just going to read the first Mishna here of chapter 8, and then I'll try to take a question or two, and then that'll be done, and we'll have done highlights of 5 pages today, and we'd be caught up. Mishnah number 1 of chapter 8 on page 78a of Tractate Kesubos. Mishnah number 1, with regard to a woman to whom property was bequeathed before she was betrothed, and then she was betrothed, Beit Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that she may sell or give the property as a gift, and the transaction is valid. It was her property. She owned it before the betrothal, so even after she's betrothed, she can sell it or give it away. It's hers to do what she wants. However, if the property was bequeathed to her after she was betrothed, now it falls under the authority of the prospective husband, right? He's already betrothed to her, so Beis Shammai say she may sell it. Even when she is betrothed, but not when she's married. Beis Hillel say once she's betrothed, she may no longer sell property that she receives after she was betrothed. Now, both these, Beis Shammai and those, Beis Hillel, agree that if she did sell it or give it away as a gift, the transaction is valid. In other words, she's not married yet. Once she's married, if she receives property, it belongs to her and her husband, and she can't sell it unilaterally. During betrothal, she's not supposed to, according to Beis Hillel, but if she does, then after the fact, the gift or sale is valid. Rabbi Yehuda said that the sages said before Rabban Gamliel, since he acquired the woman herself through betrothal, will he not acquire the property from the moment of their betrothal? Why then is this transaction valid? Right? They say even according to Beis Hillel, after the fact, if she did give away something she received while she was betrothed, that transaction is valid. But if she's betrothed, doesn't the husband acquire her, right? The betrothal is an active acquisition. So why doesn't he acquire property that now comes into their couple even during the state of betrothal? Rabban Gamliel said to them, with regard to the new property that she inherited after marriage, we are ashamed because it is unclear why she cannot sell it. Right? Even after marriage, when for sure she cannot sell property that she is given as a gift to her because it belongs to the community, him and her as it were, but still they're not sure how to exactly find the legal basis for that. And they're not even sure about that. Well, are you also going to say that this exists prior to marriage, during the state of betrothal? No, if she receives personal private property while they're betrothed, they're not fully married yet, and she does have the right to dispose of it as she wishes. If the property was bequeathed to her after she was married, okay, then Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that if she sold the property or gave it away, the husband may repossess it from purchasers. If she inherited the property before she was married, and then she was married, Rabban Gamliel says if she sold or gave away the property after the marriage, the transaction is valid. Rabbi Hanina ben Akavia said that the sages said before Rabban Gamliel, since he acquired the woman through marriage, will he not acquire the property that she was holding at that time? Will he not acquire the property? So Rabban Gamliel said to them, with regard to the new property, we are ashamed because we don't have the legal basis, and you seek to impose a prohibition with regard to the old property that she brought into the marriage. That is her property to do with what she wants. The only thing they all agree on is if she inherits or is given property after she's married, that she can't dispose of that without her husband's permission. Rabbi Shimon distinguishes between one type of property and another type of property. Property that is known to the husband, she may not sell once she is married. And if she sold it or gave it away, the transaction is void. Property that is unknown to the husband, she may not sell. But if she did sell it or give it away, the transaction is valid since he wasn't counting on that property at the time of the marriage. That's what I've got for us today. Let me see if I can answer a quick question. If the betrothal is invalid, but the couple sleep together, so they're married, how do they deal with the ketubah? Very good. But if you get married without a ketubah, what do you get? You get the standard ketubah, the implied ketubah, right? So even if there was no ketubah, she has a marriage payment if she's a virgin of 200 dinars, if she's a non-virgin of 100 dinars, like she's a widow or divorcee from previous marriage. So that she gets as of right. The sages created as a right in Jewish marriage. So even though they never made the ketubah, maybe they might have at the time of betrothal, but let's say they didn't. They just did a simple act of acquisition. Then later they became married through bia, through sexual intercourse. They never wrote a ketubah, but she's entitled to those standard terms. I know Nina had to leave. Is there anything? I'll just read Sharon's comment and finish with that. Working as a therapist in Lakewood, New Jersey, in the Frum community, the religious community, families with sons with muscular dystrophy often don't share that information publicly so as not to impact the marriageability of the boys' sisters. As the boys develop the disability, but the girls are carriers, does this constitute an invisible disability? What a great question. That is like such an important, emotional, nuanced, and complicated question. I have no idea what the answer is. That's the kind of thing you would go to a posek, right? You would go to a paskening rabbi, very expert in these kinds of laws, and ask that question. Great question. That's what I've got for us today. We are caught up. We are on the Daf Yomi schedule once again, and with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow at the regular Friday time, noon Pacific. I have to run off and lead services and say Kaddish for my mom. Have a great